Welcome to your in-depth weekly astrology overview and zodiac forecast for week commencing the 7th of April. I'm going to share with you some standout details to begin with, then on screen the event chart right at the start of the week, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole 7 days. Then I'll go through each of the influences as they feed in, frame by frame, to give you a really clear picture of what we can all collectively expect. Then I'll share each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. A warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it thrive and do so now, but also click or tap the bell notification symbol. If you would like to work with me one-to-one, please check out my testimonials. You'll see how other people have experienced that. I also have a new service. I do astrology video readings now, and once finished I send you all the information and I'm illustrating your charts on screen. It's less expensive than a one-to-one, but it is proving very popular. You can take advantage of my special written report offer below, but also if you'd like to get your free natal chart, you can download it by clicking below. It's absolutely brilliant, if I say so myself. You can also sign up for your free daily written horoscope. We've now added a new dimension to this. I provide an overview for the dominating astrological influence that affects all of us that day. You can read that and then read your personal zodiac sign. All of that below for more. So this week begins with Mercury ending its retrograde, but it won't return to the sign of Aries until the 16th, and it won't emerge from shadow until the 26th of April. And because Saturn is shepherding Mercury very closely right through this week, even if there has been something that stumbled around communications or a contract, it's unlikely to be resolved this week. Not least because on Monday, Venus and Saturn are in the first of 2 exact conjunctions this month. The first of these sees Venus still in retrograde. Venus can be about relationships, Saturn can be about limitation, but Venus can also be about money. We may find ourselves having to rethink our approach to our resources, but also because Saturn is at the end of its total journey, which began in 1996 in the sign of Aries, in the sign of Pisces, its culmination point. We're also seeing quite a lot of outcomes, especially as Saturn is very close this week, not just to Venus and Mercury, but also to the North Node. So this is going to be a week when there could be a big reset around finances, but also if there has been some issues around relationships that have been simmering in the background, despite the fact that at the start of this week the Sun and Jupiter are on excellent form. By the end of the week, the full moon in the sign of relating, Libra, is clashing with Venus, its ruler, in a quincunx. It's opposite Chiron, but it's also broadly in a T-square with Mars in Cancer. So something could explode into the open at the end of this week, which could be very sensitive. So we may see some information surfacing that's been shielded, hidden. Maybe someone's going to tell us something that they've been stewing on for some while. Now on the screen now you can see the event chart. Now of course we're always mindful of the position of the luminaries, and you can see the Sun is in the sign of Aries, but it's also in the second decan. The Sun in Aries is exalted, but in the second decan that's sub-ruled by the Sun. So it's a great place for the Sun to be, and it's forging a dazzling alliance with Jupiter, the planet of growth, fortune and of expansion. So we could come into this week hoping to be very dynamic, but that gathering of players in the sign of Pisces, the posse, the stellium there, with Saturn so close to all of them, is really telling. So although Mercury does go direct later on Monday, the fact that Saturn and the Venus conjunction is really going to be quite a very powerful point and really can bring some harsh realities to bear. But it doesn't change the fact that through this week, Mars, despite clashing with the full moon at the end of the week, does forge an excellent trine with all those players in Pisces. If we're doing things based on our instincts and taking action on what feels right, we could actually make real progress. It's just if we dive into this week based on the optimism of the Sun's angle to the position of Jupiter without considering those more subtle psychological energies in Pisces. You can also see that Uranus is forging a fantastic link to Saturn and Mars at the start of the week as well. Uranus in Taurus has not been easy. It's in full, but this suggests if we repurpose some old skills and knowledge, the Pisces energy, or we've put a lot of hard work in over a long period of time, there is an opportunity actually to improve the stability in our situations, but it does really depend on those past efforts. The other line from this week, I feel, is although Pluto is just beyond a 3-degree sextile with Neptune, that is very significant because Neptune in Aries is very much about passion and, of course, inspiration. Neptune can be very much to do with imagination, and the sign of Aries can be about where we start things. So that link to Pluto is interesting. We may see some new alliances being forged, particularly amongst people collectively. So in terms of the week as it goes on, so the big takeout is that full moon, which occurs on Sunday. The full moon in Libra each year is an opportunity to think if the thrust of the sign of Aries, which has come recently from the solar eclipse, but also the spring equinox and cardinal quadrant 1, which starts the year off, all of that brings a sense of excitement. But because the ruler Mars is in a sign that he's not at his best in, he's in full in Cancer, but also is in a tense right angle with Chiron in Aries, very much about actualizing our individuality. If we rush things, it's not going to be good for us. And I feel by the time we get to the full moon, because Venus is in a quincunx with the position of the moon, there is a lack of integrated energy between the moon position, which requires balance, and also is very much about equilibrium and fairness around relationships. So if someone around us has done something in a very impulsive, direct, thrusting way, that Aries energy, but isn't thinking about the emotional dimension, the gathering in the sign of Pisces, but also Mars in the sign of Cancer, we're going to see a big boiling up of energy as this week draws to a close. So don't be surprised if there are some big quarrels that are playing out. Now that could be internationally, to be fair, but it could also be to do with our personal situations too. So if there's someone around us that we don't feel is very aware of how their actions impact on us, we could find ourselves a lot more outspoken, because Mars in Cancer can be a very triggering energy. It can be a very emotional energy, and anger can come out in a very passionate but not necessarily such a considered way. Now, please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. But please do check out that free natal horoscope by clicking on the link beneath this video. Welcome Aries to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 7th of April 2025. As this week begins, the Sun in your sign forges a dazzling alliance with Jupiter. The mighty Jupiter is the largest planet beyond the Sun itself. When these two collaborate, it gives us a sense that we can achieve anything we want. So your spirits could be heightened as you enter the week, particularly with the knowledge that Mercury is going retrograde. If you have been waiting for a confirmation on some outstanding correspondence or contract, perhaps to do with a banking issue. It may be a little frustrating if you're still waiting to hear. I have to be honest, with Saturn applying to Venus on Monday, but also Mercury all through this week, as well as the North Node, there may be a little bit of a sense of inhibition. As much as you may want to be very dynamic, it might not be possible to quite get the traction and pace that you would like. Also, someone quite close to you may not necessarily be completely convinced of what you're trying to do. Sometimes the people who can wound us the most are those people that we have the closest relationships to. So that can be our family members. It may not be that someone's trying to be awkward. Perhaps they're just seeing things in a different way. And one of the other features of this week is, as much as you may want to be in the moment, and it is true that once Mercury joins you again on the 16th, that will become much easier. I just feel there's a sense that something from your past, or some sense of inhibition, or maybe a little bit of inner resistance, perhaps even some anxiety, could stop you picking up the pace you would really like to achieve. So how do you deal with this, particularly around a relationship matter? With the full moon by the end of the week in the sign of relating, Libra, it could mean that someone's going to challenge you about your approach. There may even be some old issues, some wounds that haven't quite been resolved or released that could come up in quite a potent way. And the reason for this, Aries, is the moon in Libra likes equilibrium, but because your ruler is in a T-square with the position of the sun and the moon, any sensitivities that are there are likely to be hard to disguise, because Mars in Cancer can be very defensive. Not only that, Venus the relator, crunched by Saturn on Monday, is also very close to Saturn, as is Mercury, for the whole of this week in a very psychological part of your situation. So if there has been something that you've been harbouring, or you're finding it difficult to come to terms with, perhaps it's a past loss or breakup, perhaps you're going through some kind of separation at the moment, it will be difficult to embrace that very exciting Sun-Jupiter energy in quite the way you would like. So the best way forwards this week, I feel, even if it is around your financial hopes, where Uranus is actually really helpful to you, what I would say to you is listen to your gut instinct even more astutely than perhaps you usually would do. And if someone does give you some advice, or you hear something secondhand, perhaps something that could be somewhat wounding, the main thing is you try not to react too quickly. That may be what someone actually wants you to do. So try to stay on an even keel as you enter into that full moon at the end of this week. But if you're someone who's very aware of some of your vulnerabilities, some of the things that are holding you back, some of the things that you find challenging, you can still make progress this week simply because you're in a nice balance within yourself, and you're not going to put yourself under too much pressure expecting some kind of perfection. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope, it's brilliant, or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the Daily Overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. So Taurus, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast sees your ruler, Venus, in a very tight embrace with Saturn on Monday. That is going to go on for the whole of the week, but Mercury, the communicator and the planet of precision, does go direct on Monday, but they're both very close to the North Node, but also Saturn for the whole of the week. And for you, the sign of Pisces is about your future hopes. It can also be about the collective, your friendships, your social situation. And of course, Saturn can be a little bit of a killjoy. But one of the things that Saturn can help you with this week, if you've got realistic hopes for the future and you've really done your homework in a painstaking and careful way, and your idea is perhaps a little different, the link between the collective in Pisces, Uranus in your sign, and Mars in your sector of everyday communication can actually see you make huge progress. What could be a little more challenging is if there is someone around you who's not totally on side. Now that may be in a friendship situation. Sometimes with Venus and Saturn, we could become much more conscious of who is not quite as invested as we'd like. Also, Venus can be about values. If your values start to seem in sharp relief to someone else, that can show up as well, particularly by the time of the full moon on Sunday. Now for you, the moon is asking you to focus on your physical well-being. The sun is in the part of your chart much more to do with the psychological dimension, but it's very close to Chiron, the comet, which is very much to do with healing. If you do feel a little bit vulnerable in some ways, it's possible, especially if there is someone around you that you feel a little bit let down by, and that could well be a friend or a colleague. The chances are, because Mars interacts with that or this particular full moon in a very punchy way, it's going to be difficult to hold your counsel. So if you feel someone's being a bit disloyal, a bit picky, or perhaps even a bit two-faced, you're going to want to assert your view of the situation, and in a very assertive manner. And that actually could be a very good thing. But if there is something that you're feeling particularly tender about, I don't feel that this is the best of the weeks to be too open and too revealing. And so when it comes to confidences, I would suggest that you do keep it to sharing with the people that you know are the most trusted and reliable citizens in your situation. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope, it's brilliant, or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the daily overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. So Gemini, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast sees Mercury, your ruler, go direct on Monday. And that's obviously to be welcomed. It won't be until the 16th that Mercury moves into your 11th house, very much to do with friendships and your network, and it won't emerge from shadow until the 26th. And it is shadowed by the strict Saturn for the whole of this week. When it comes to your professional or worldly interactions, you could find that your moves, your ambitions, even your goals are very carefully scrutinized, not least because Venus, the planet of relating, but also money, is in a conjunction with Saturn on Monday, which is very powerful. Venus does continue its retrograde. Not everybody you encounter in your workplace or your worldly situation will necessarily be won over by your persuasion and charm. So it's going to be important to be very, very realistic. Now, if you do work in a big organisation which has particular ways and protocols of approaching things, and you're much more of a natural bohemian, the fact that the Sun forges an amazing link with Jupiter in your sign at the start of the week could make you much more aware that this may be a misfit that you just cannot mend. And by the end of the week, and we get to the full moon occurs in your sister air sign of Libra. This is where you want to be joyful, playful and fun. The Sun, on the other hand, is very much to do with your connection to others, and it's very close to the comet Chiron, which can be about what we need to work on. If there are certain friendships, particularly professional or worldly friendships, that aren't quite as you would like, it may be down to money, because with Mars forging, in fact, a very dynamic link to the gathering in Pisces for the whole of this week, if you have got a well-structured approach, you're realistic about who you need to deal with, you understand that they will have certain expectations, and you don't mind putting perhaps the more cavalier side of your nature to one side, I feel that you can achieve a lot this week. But if you are someone who wants to be more of a free spirit, more individualistic, you want to pursue your own agenda, you may find yourself struggling to please all of the people all of the time on this particular full moon. Especially if you feel that certain friends or associates tend to take you, as you see it, for granted, particularly around perhaps your generosity, Mars in the second house. So when it comes to your values, that could be something that creates quite a sticking point between you and the people you need to meet in those worldly situations. So as much as your professional goals and ambitions could be clarified this week with Mercury going direct, I feel you do need to be patient, you need to be tactical, you need to understand what the rules of the game are. And if you're more of a free spirit, try to go with that, or it may be time to switch out, apply for new jobs, or start up even your own personal enterprise. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope, it's brilliant, or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the Daily Overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. So Cancer, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast is really interesting because the gathering of energy in Pisces, your sister water sign, are all linking brilliantly with Mars in your sign. Now Mars technically is in full in Cancer, but since the 6th of January has given you a chance, an opportunity, despite its initial retrograde, to strut your stuff in a more assertive way. But Mars's link to Saturn at the start of this week helps you to balance that assertion with a real pragmatism and perhaps some very careful planning. Mercury also ends its retrograde in Pisces as the week begins. If you have been waiting for news on a travel plan or contract, better news could be coming soon. But we have to acknowledge that Venus and Saturn are in an exact conjunction as the week begins. Now that can be quite limiting. And for me, because the sun is so high in the sky for you, if you're not really enjoying your work or your responsibilities, or you feel your ambitions in some ways are being curtailed, I feel this is a week which could bring it all up to the boil, particularly as the week draws to a close with the full moon in the sign of Libra, which for you is very much about your emotions, whereas Mars in your sign is much more to do with your desires. And the moon, therefore, in Libra is an opportunity to check out that you are feeling in the right place with the right people, you're on the right track, because your emotional world is really the key to your happiness, because your sign is ruled by the moon, very much to do with that inner dimension. But ironically, as this week begins, Jupiter, the planet of hope and faith for you in house 12, links brilliantly to the sun in your 10th house of ambition. You could find out something this week which informs your moves. It could be some soundings that you take privately. It could be that you're going to have a philosophical shift, because if you do feel penned in and limited, the fact that Saturn is still in a tight conjunction with not just Venus but Saturn and the North Node right through this week, if you feel that you're in the wrong situation from a philosophical viewpoint, or your desire to be a freer spirit, or to travel, or to just have more spontaneity and flexibility is being inhibited by an overwhelm in terms of your professional situation, by the time we get to the full moon on Sunday, that's in an opposition with Chiron, the comet which is very much to do with our so-called wound. And if you have been really going for it in terms of your goals and ambitions, but you're not feeling that comfortable in the environment, Mars in your sign intersects them, and also Venus forges a quincunx with the position of the moon, and Venus rules the sign of Libra, So if something feels out of balance, but particularly is cramping that flexibility, that part of you that wants to be more of an independent person, you could find yourself spinning out of a position that might be well paid. It might actually meet some of your expectations, but if it's crushing your morale because you can't really express yourself in the way you want, I feel that's Uranus's impacted this week, which is very powerful in its connection with the position of Mars, but also those players in the sign of Pisces too. You're a water sign, Cancer, and so that watery energy of Pisces and Mars, but also for you, the full moon in Libra is your fourth house. It's your home point. It's where you need to feel safe and protected. And if you're ending this week not feeling safe and protective, Mars in your sign is pushing you to be brave and decisive in terms of the life choices you make in the following 2 weeks of the impact of the full moon. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope. It's brilliant. Or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the daily overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. Leo, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast begins with the Sun in your fellow fire sign of Aries, forging a stunning link to Jupiter, the planet of plenty. Jupiter can also be pretty jovial, and in the 11th house, where it is for you, that can be about your friendship group, your social connections. But the energy in the sign of Pisces is going to be potentially very testing this week. It does hold opportunities, but for you it's house 8. Now, in terms of the practicalities of life, that can be shared finance, resources, can be things like pensions, savings, shares, investments and legacies. And on Monday, Mercury goes direct in that area. If you have been waiting for some kind of communication, it could be coming soon, but just be conscious that Saturn applies its limiting energy, not just to Mercury for the whole of the week, despite it going direct, but also Venus and the North Node. Some kind of karmic situation around finance could play out this week, therefore. But also the 8th house can be about deep transformation. If there's something going on that you're going through at the moment that does feel quite challenging, just know that the position of the Sun in Aries for you is asking you to be conscious of your need to escape or be free of what's really weighing you down. And it may unfortunately be a romantic relationship that just isn't working anymore. But equally, it could be a business alliance that you don't feel so comfortable with. Because Mars in your 12th house, very much to do with passion and assertion, is actually forging a very strong link with those players in Pisces. And for some Leos, you may be finding old contacts or old skills and resources can be redeployed but in a fresh way, which actually can be very good to increase your income. And that's coming from the sparkling energies of Uranus, linking brilliantly to Mars, but also those players in Pisces too. But by the end of this week, we do have a very electric full moon. It's in the sign of Libra, which is very much about balance and equilibrium, but also about relationships. But the 3rd house is our quick thinking. It can also be to do with quick journeying. The Sun, however, is very close to Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, in your 9th house. A conversation you have at the end of this week or in the following 2 weeks could reveal something that actually is very telling indeed. Some information you learn could actually shift your whole situation in a completely powerful way. It could be about someone you're attracted to. It may be about an investment. It could be about a business idea. It may be about an ongoing relationship. But I sense there may be something that's about to come into the open. It could be that someone's just got a completely different worldview from you, but rather, whereas in the past they may have agreed to differ, they could be much more assertive about saying how they feel, which you could find very positive or you could find very challenging. But somehow or another, a mysterious piece of information is about to bubble into the open over the next fortnight. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope, it's brilliant, or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the Daily Overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. Virgo, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast begins with your ruler Mercury going direct. You could hear from a friend at the start of this week, and it can absolutely delight you. It may not be that there's been any falling out, it's just perhaps you've both been busy, but that reconnection can be very reassuring. Also, if you've applied for a job, for example, it's possible that you're going to get the email that you've been waiting for. But Venus, the relator, is in an exact conjunction with Saturn at the start of this week. And Saturn is very influential this week, Virgo, because he continues to apply to Venus throughout the week, but also in a conjunction to Mercury, but also the North Node. Some kind of important connection could be made this week in a very positive way, and it could prove to be hugely influential but very lasting. But you know, unfortunately, the converse can be true. If there is an involvement you have, and it doesn't have to be romantic, with a friend, family member, a colleague, business partner, and the flow of communication just isn't resolved by Mercury going direct, there may be something that needs rethinking. And Mars, in a part of your chart that's very much to do with your highest hopes, linking very positively to that energy in Pisces. Mars in the water sign of Cancer, Pisces, the water sign too, your instincts are really alive, but it's Uranus in the part of your chart that's to do with independence, freedom, and perhaps even a risk-taking that really brings a very exciting dimension to what this week offers. And because the Sun forges an ambitious link to Jupiter at the start of this week, if you are wanting to go for a job where you want to test yourself out in a more competitive environment, it's all to go for. But you know, whatever skills you've got, whatever talent and experience, that won't count for much if the dimension in terms of the exchange of energy around relationships doesn't quite work. So if you go to an interview or do a presentation and you don't really feel comfortable, however much the project or the prospect excites you, listen to your inner gut when it comes to whether there is a simpatico or not. But as I mentioned, the opposite can be true. You could find a binding connection with someone this week that proves to be really, truly exciting. Now, by the end of this week, there is a full moon, and for you, it goes across your 2nd and 8th house cusp. But Venus rules the 2nd house cusp, where the full moon is. And Venus, in that sector of relating, is not in a very good angle to the full moon. So in a personal context, if your approach to money or values don't quite align with someone you're trying to collaborate with, despite all the goodwill in the world and the best ideas, there may still not be quite enough to push it over the line and start to gain traction for a longer term relationship. Also in an ongoing romantic tie, if there has been a lack of intimacy, or you both have very different approaches to spending money, that also can be an issue that explodes into the open over the next couple of weeks. So as much as relationships can be very powerful this week, I think it's going to be very powerful in a very dynamic and positive way, but equally in some situations you may need to accept there isn't the level of cooperation and collaboration needed to make future progress. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope, it's brilliant, or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the Daily Overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. Libra, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast begins with the Sun in your sector of relating, forging a gorgeous link with Jupiter, the planet of plenty, in the part of your chart to do with travel, contracts, your connections to people from overseas, or perhaps a holiday. If you do plan something like that this week, certainly at the start of this week, it could be something that gives you quite a fillip, because your ruler Venus is crunched by the rigorous energies, the exacting energies of Saturn on Monday. But Mercury does go direct, which is great. But if you are someone who really is setting your sights on your professional situation, part of the reason for that is that Mars has been giving you a lot of extra encouragement to assert yourself, but especially since the 6th of January. Now, because of the retrograde that went on through to the 24th of February, not everything may have gone exactly at the pace you've liked, but as you go into this week, Mars, continuing in the authoritative part of your chart, forges an excellent link with Mercury, which goes direct on Monday, but also Saturn and your ruler Venus. The North Node's in there too. If you feel that you've really dedicated yourself to the cause in the last couple of years, particularly with Saturn's support, you've done those extra hours, you've covered for people, you've been very conscientious, you've taken responsibility, you're going to want to see some rewards. But if those rewards are not forthcoming, when we get to the point of the full moon in your sign on Sunday, I feel it's going to see a more militant part of your nature coming into the open over the next couple of weeks. And the reason for this is that your ruler Venus forges a discordant angle to the moon. So Venus is in your 6th house, the moon is in your 1st house. 1st and 6th don't integrate well. The 1st is about our identity. The 6th is where we have obligations and where we're more sacrificing. But the moon wants you to be more single-minded. The sun, however, on your 7th house cusp, along with Chiron, is asking you to feel seen and heard, recognized and appreciated for all that dedication you've shown. But Mars intersects both points. Mars, in such a dominant visible position, basically says that if you don't get the recognition or appreciation or rewards over the time of the full moon period, the following 2 weeks, it could see you asserting yourself in a very, very firm way, at the least. But of course, the 6th house is not all about give, it can be about get. And one of the things you should be thinking about getting from it, from that energy this week, is just making sure that you're getting enough rest, you're getting good nutrition, you're getting enough exercise as well. And that's something that can help to keep you in trim, always important for you, and help you then moving forwards towards those big goals and ambitions which are so important to you. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope, it's brilliant, or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the Daily Overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. Scorpio, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast begins with the Sun in the practical 6th house, forging a link with Jupiter, the planet of fortune, in the part of your chart to do with finance. Now, we are seeing obviously a big reset in that area, but if anyone can tease more out of their existing resources, it's going to be you. You could be very shrewd with that combination. But the collective in the sign of Pisces, for you, the 5th house, sees Mercury go direct on Monday, but also the stern Saturn applies in an exact conjunction to Venus. So if you are thinking about doing something more speculative, just be aware that the 5th house could, with Saturn there, applying to not just Venus but Mercury and the North Node all week, does suggest you should be a little bit cautious. Now, of course, the 5th house can be where we shine up and demonstrate our qualities, our flair and artistry. Saturn simply saying, work even harder to let people know what you have to offer. Now, your traditional ruler Mars is in a part of your chart which is seeing you in the mood to be more experimental. Now, if you are single, you could encounter someone, if that's what you want, who does really make your pulse race this week because of Mars's link to Uranus. It could be a very sparky encounter and perhaps a little unpredictable. But if there's something about that other person that goes beyond the physical attraction, and you feel that they may actually want to stick around and play a longer term role in your life, someone could come in that really is very meaningful. Unfortunately though, Scorpio, Saturn applying to Venus in the 5th house, I have to tell you this, it could flag up a relationship that just isn't working. And it may even be in family dynamics. If you have children that are very strong-willed, there could be a little some pinch points and tensions with them this week. But as the week draws to a close, a very tender full moon is forged in the sign of Libra, which for you is the 12th house. The 12th house is very psychological. In an ongoing relationship, maybe is something will be teased into the open over the next couple of weeks, because Venus, the ruler of the sign of Libra, is not in a very good angle to the full moon itself. And the sun on the other side of the heavens is in a very scrutinizing area. So someone could be a bit picky, a bit irritable, a bit intolerant around something that is quite tender for you, or may not be prepared to listen to your view or your side of the story. And because your traditional ruler Mars is in a T-square to the position of the Sun, Chiron, but also the opposition to the Moon, and is in your 9th house, if you feel that someone's being unfair, playing games, using some dark arts in order to manipulate a situation, they may find a much more forceful response from you, because Mars in the 9th house will not be silenced. It will have its point of view, particularly in its link to the liberating energies of Uranus in your sector of relating. So as far as romance goes this week, it could become baked in with someone new. It could be that you need to work harder with an existing relationship. But if there is any disloyalty or uncertainty about an ongoing tie, I feel that full moon could bring it to the surface. And I should just say that a 12th, 6th house full moon could also show up anyone at work who's not particularly supportive as well. But it's the type of person who won't necessarily tell you outright what the issue is. So do watch out for some office politics. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope. It's brilliant. Or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the Daily Overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. Sagittarius, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast sees your ruler Jupiter forging a delicious link with the Sun. The Sun's in the part of your chart to do with where you can prime up and display your charisma. Jupiter's in the part of your chart that's to do with relationships. There's a link. It may be at work where you can interact skillfully with people, but your natural enthusiasm, a massive part of your nature, can really be burnished by that combination. But also on Monday, Mercury, the planet of communication, which has been tracking backwards, goes direct. If you have experienced those inevitable delays, tech issues, glitches and frustrations, and perhaps even recently crosswires around family arrangements. Mercury going direct is obviously a help, but on this particular occasion, I don't feel that we're going to get the uplift straight away. Mercury will return to your sister fire sign on the 16th, emerge from shadow on the 26th. That's when you're really going to see things picking up pace, because also on Monday, Saturn, the planet of limitation, applies to Venus like Mercury in the sign of Pisces. But for you, that's your 4th house. Whatever you want to achieve in terms of that dazzling alliance between the Sun and Jupiter, therefore, it has to really feel right. Your emotional family situation needs to be geared up for you to really relax and go with the flow. So if there are some sensitive strands that you need to attend to, whether it's to do with moving home, perhaps improving where you're living, dealing with contractors, working from home, supporting family members, older or younger, there may just be a little bit of resistance and sluggishness. But if you are wanting to do something in the property situation, Mars, the planet of desire, in the 8th house of your chart, does link very constructively to Saturn, but also to Uranus. And it may be by looking at a situation in a fresh light, you can tease out a solution. Maybe it's to do with financing, the aforementioned. Maybe it's more to do with how you're going to plan a new business idea that you've got that is going to be home based. But the more pragmatic you can be, the better, and that will be a counterpoint to the exuberant combination of Jupiter and the Sun. If it was more focused on that this week, I think you would be in for an absolutely nailed on jolly time. But I think being conscious of your responsibilities and obligations, but also how you feel, is really important. And to be honest, it's one of the lessons that Saturn has brought over the last couple of years, and it's a lesson that can have benefits, even if there has been sadnesses and disappointments over the same time. Now, by the end of this week, things start to shift. You could be much in demand, and we all know we can't please all of the time, all of the people, all of the time. It's because of a full moon in Libra, which is delicious socially, but the Sun on the other side of the heavens is asking you to hold steady with what's right for you. So if other people want to pull you into their invitations, it's very flattering, but it may deflect you in some kind of way. But also Venus forges quincunx to the position of the moon. So whatever is proposed, whoever may be seeking your attention, how does it feel? That really is going to be an important thing, particularly at the end of this week. But if there is a romantic dimension to this connection, the fact that Chiron is so close to the Sun just pushes you not to doubt yourself, to try to go with something, even if you have got some perhaps old issues like we all have. We have life experiences where things don't go to plan, can be quite wounding, and therefore the collective in Pisces can be a little bit inhibiting. But Chiron is saying to you, try to go forwards when it comes to demonstrating just how brilliant, but also how gorgeous you are. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope. It's brilliant. Or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the daily overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. Capricorn, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast begins with your ruler, the stern Saturn, applying in an exact conjunction to Venus. But Mercury, the planet of communication, goes direct. That's really helpful. But Saturn is probably the most influential player this week. Saturn asks us to be cautious, but it also asks us to be wise. And the gathering of energy in the sign of Pisces is very much about quick communication. Venus can be about how we relate, can be about affections. So essentially Saturn's like a sentry saying, whatever you say, whatever you think about buying or do actually buy when it comes to tech or a mode of transport, really do your homework. But that's something that often comes very naturally to you. But on the other side of the heavens to you, Mars, the planet of passion, is in your sector of relating, forging an excellent link to those players in the sign of Pisces. And also Uranus is prompting you, as it has been since 2019, to walk a little bit more on the wild side. So Uranus feeds into the Pisces energy, but also into the Cancer energy. So if there is someone that you really like, one of the things that Saturn could see you or experience this week is that you can suddenly feel quite tongue-tied, shy or inhibited, perhaps because you realise the other person means so much to you. How do you deal with this? Well, at the start of this week, Capricorn, the Sun in your 4th house of emotion does forge a buoyant link with Jupiter, the planet of hope. One of the things you could talk to the person you're drawn to, whether it's a friend, whether it's a business acolyte, whether it is someone that you're drawn to romantically, talk about practicalities, just things that are going on in the world. Get things moving in terms of the flow of communication. With Mercury going direct, there is a possibility for that. By the end of the week and the full moon, your emotions will be very close to the surface, to be honest. But it's very important with this particular full moon, when it comes to your professional aspirations, that you feel comfortable in the environment that you're operating within. And if you do feel that conversations are very stilted, it just feels very tense, it's not very flowy, I feel it's a full moon that could see you wanting to be more assertive, because Mars interacts the position of the moon and the sun in a T-square and can give you a little bit more bravery to speak out, even if other people seem a little closed or resistant to your ideas. So it's a full moon that over the following 2 weeks is likely going to give you food for thought about how you live at home, the sun, but also how you feel about where you work. And getting a better balance is really important. And I think for you, it's feeling that your ideas, your personal expression can be accepted. But this is a week when, ironically, if you work very hard at saying what you mean and meaning what you say, people can get the message, but they may still find the delivery from you a little on the cool side. So just be conscious of that. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope. It's brilliant. Or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the Daily Overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. Aquarius, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast begins with the Sun in the chatty 3rd house, linking epipheasantly with the upbeat Jupiter in your 5th house of social interaction, but also of fun. That's a very bright combination. Also, Pluto in your sign is forging a sextile to Neptune in the part of your chart to do with everyday communication, along with the Sun, but also with Chiron. So how you express your ideas is going to be a big part of this week. But within ideas, we have values. And values come from the 2nd house. And that can be about the things we believe in. It can be about our personal worth. It can be about life foundations, but also money. If you find yourself discussing money this week, there could be a little bit of resistance from the other side. Because although Mercury goes direct on Monday, that's to be welcomed, I don't feel until it gets back to Aries on the 16th that things will get quite as resolved as quickly as you would like. And Saturn, really, your traditional ruler, is the stumbling block. It's in a tight embrace with Venus on Monday. That can create some anxiety over immediate finances, but also it can starkly show up where our values just don't align with other people. But by the end of the week, because of the role of Mars and also Uranus, if you really work hard, or you have worked very hard over the last couple of years with Saturn's support, you've embraced it rather than resisted it, you may have become a lot more disciplined about how you use your budget, but also you could have become thriftier or more creative. You may have actually given up some old lifestyle choices which didn't quite work anymore financially. And actually, all of that progression could be showed up in a very dynamic and positive way this week if you feel that your situation is stabilising. But the full moon in your sister air sign of Libra, as the week draws to a close, is for you the 9th house. That's about your higher hopes in terms of your ideals. The 3rd house, the chatty one, is Aries, where, of course, there's Chiron and also Neptune. But it's Venus in the sign of Pisces in a quincunx with that full moon, which could prove tricky. So if you are discussing ideas, don't necessarily expect that charm, Venus, will win over whoever you're trying to persuade. But what you can do is point out the practical benefits of whatever you're offering, whether it is your own business, whether it's you applying for a job, trying to renegotiate a package with an existing boss. Mars is asking you to really break down in a very detailed way exactly the benefits that you bring to a situation. And with Uranus in your 4th house, your modern ruler, the fact that you can be very flexible but also innovative as well as practical is something that people will see by the end of this week. But you can't force your ideas on them, but what you can do is coach them towards what obviously is your ability to see the big picture in such a brilliant way. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope, it's brilliant, or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the daily overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign. Pisces, your week commencing the 7th of April forecast sees Mercury in your sign go direct. If you have felt a bit inhibited, a bit tongue-tied, that could help. If a project that you're very invested in individually has stumbled, it could speed up. And the reason I'm using the word could is Saturn, because although Saturn is in a very dynamic link with Uranus, the planet of innovation, and Mars, the planet of assertion, all through this week, he's also applying to Venus, exalted in your sign, but continuing her retrograde. And that embrace is total on Monday. And also Mercury, although it is direct, is still very close to Saturn, like Venus and the North Node, for the whole of this week. It all points towards some kind of fated situation. You're a very creative sign, whether it is through music, whether it is through being a maker, whether it's through being very compassionate, whether it's through the spiritual or psychic dimension, whether it is through music, filmmaking, photography or art, you can often be inspirational. If over the last couple of years you found that your physical vitality has been low, you may have felt hemmed in, it hasn't been very easy, it's felt like you've been pushing a boulder up a steep hill, it is because of Saturn being in your sign. But what you can learn this week is just how resilient you've been and how that resilience and hard work can pay off for you. The Sun is actually in a very lucky angle to the planet of fortune, Jupiter, at the start of this week. It may be linked to your family or your property that some good news comes in. But if you have really persevered on something where it hasn't been easy, you have encountered a lot of resistance, perhaps even opposition, where people haven't been very supportive, by the end of this week with the full moon, although it is about for you shared finances or the psychological evolution of your situation, and the Sun, Chiron and Neptune are all in your 2nd house of everyday money, Venus in your sign is asking you to equate your progress based on what's important to you, and that could be a more ephemeral gain rather than a more practical, physical, or more material improvement. So if you feel traction is developing, the flair you've invested is making progress, and you're not quite seeing the financial rewards, keep on keeping on. If you are seeing the rewards, I'd be absolutely thrilled for you. And with Mars in a part of your chart, T-squaring that full moon at the end of the week, you could find yourself impulsive and want to splash out and do something completely off the cuff as the week draws to a close. And even if it does cost you a few pennies or dollars, it will be something that gives you a lot of delight. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal horoscope, it's brilliant, or subscribe for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, which now has a new edition of the Daily Overview, the review of the most important planetary aspect that day for everyone, as well as your zodiac sign.